Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name's Jen Miroff, and I'm the chair of the Legislative Action Committee. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts, Executive Director Celia Canavan, and Board Presidents Courtney Rowe Rogers and Courtney Henderson, welcome to Protecting Immigrants in the Commonwealth. Immigration Legislative Specialist Amy Cooper, shout out to Amy, and I are very excited to host our Protecting Massachusetts Communities Coalition colleague, Gil Calderon, Director of Advocacy for MIRA, Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition. Our goal for tonight is to learn how we can take action at the state level to protect immigrants. This program is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be shared and posted tomorrow. Gail will be briefing us on the current state of affairs and then take your questions via the chat. Please stay muted and hold your questions until the Q&A section of the program. As you know, due process violations are a priority for the State League, especially in our work to defend the Commonwealth against federal threats. To ground us in our work, I want to share our positions. So as a reminder, League of Women Voters is nonpartisan in that we don't endorse political parties or candidates, but we do take positions on issues through study and consensus, and we have 106 years of positions. And so under the individual liberties position related to due process violations, the Fifth Amendment, the League of Women Voters of the United States believes in the individual liberties guaranteed by the Constitution. The League is convinced that individual rights now protected by the Constitution should not be weakened or abridged. And that's an impact on issues, page 62. And our immigration position, all persons should receive fair treatment under the law. The League supports due process for all persons, including the right to a fair hearing, right to counsel, right to appeal, and right to humane treatment. And that's on page 167 of Impact on Issues. So I'll go ahead and introduce Gil. Gil Calderon is the Director of Advocacy at the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, MIRA. Most recently, he led state and federal advocacy efforts at Accentria Care Alliance, where he focused on advancing policies to support refugees and immigrant families. Prior to that, he served as an immigration specialist in the office of U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, where he assisted families, businesses, universities, and nonprofit organizations in navigating the complexities of the U.S. immigration system and advocated for timely resolutions to urgent immigration crises. A proud Cuban immigrant raised in Miami, Gil is deeply grounded in his own immigration story, having left Cuba at a young age with his family in search of freedom and opportunity. That journey continues to shape his commitment to building a more welcoming, just, and fair immigration system. He holds a Master of Law in Diplomacy from the Fletcher School at Tufts University and a bachelor's degree in International and Global Studies from Brandeis. He is also an alumnus of the Rappaport Public Policy Fellowship, through which he served at the Massachusetts Office for Refugees and Immigrants. Gil was inspired to join MIRA by his belief that as the federal government continues to fall short in protecting immigrant communities, more must be done at the state level to ensure Massachusetts remains a welcoming Commonwealth. Outside of work, Gil enjoys hiking in New Hampshire's White Mountains and taking long walks with his dog, Wally. Welcome and thank you, Gil.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Jen, and it's so good to be here with all of you tonight. I just want to say thank you. You could be anywhere else in the world right now, but you chose to be here today, not only because it's an important topic, but it just shows your dedication to immigrants and the difference that you want to see and make in the world. As Jen mentioned, I'm Gil Calderon. I am the Director of Advocacy at the MIRA Coalition. We are the largest coalition in New England advocating for the rights and inclusion of immigrants and refugees with over 150 member organizations across the Commonwealth. I'll go ahead and share my screen with you folks. I just want to share a little brief PowerPoint, to share a little bit about our programs, share a little bit of the advocacy work that we're engaged in, and how you folks can get involved. And I won't be going necessarily deep into the policy weeds here. I want to make sure I don't put you folks to sleep, but I want to give you sort of the top lines of the bills that are being considered before this legislature and how you can help move these forward. So let me go ahead and share my screen really quickly. All right. Tell me if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, here it stopped. Sorry. All right, there we go. All right. So in the first screen, you'll see the Protecting Massachusetts Communities campaign. You'll learn a little bit more about that shortly. But just for you folks to know, let's see, why isn't this? Oh, there we go. So a lot of the work that we do at MIRA is through policy advocacy, coalition building, direct engagement with lawmakers, and MIRA strives to drive legislation that protects immigrant rights here in Massachusetts. We also provide a handful of direct services programs to help immigrants with their legal needs and trainings to inform the general public. And to the left, to the bottom corner left, is our executive director, Liz Sweet, who runs our organization. She's very wonderful. Um, excuse me there. Let's see how this goes. Okay. So just a quick overview of the MIRA programs. So here you'll see that we have the Immigrant Assistance Services Program, where we provide targeted legal and case management support to newly arrived immigrants residing in Massachusetts. This was very big a few years ago. As you know, we had an increase of individuals moving to Massachusetts that required assistance. This is sort of, dwindling down, but we're still providing, case support and legal support for many individuals. As you know, immigration cases don't just, they don't get resolved overnight, or it's not a matter of days or weeks. Sometimes this can take, months to even years, depending on an individual's situation. The other program that we lead is the Citizenship Application Assistance. We provide free application assistance for eligible green card holders who want to become U.S. citizens at our clinics, as well as in the office by appointment. We also partner with many other nonprofits and municipal governments to hold these clinics in their offices as well. And we try to be as accessible as possible. Again, these are free. So if there's anyone that that is looking for a free consultation for citizenship, you're welcome to send them our way too. We also provide training and resources. So we host a range of immigration-focused trainings. For example, Know Your Rights trainings, which I'm sure many of you have probably engaged very recently. We also just provide Immigration 101. We do tailored trainings to nonprofits and other legal experts. I would say currently in the times that we're living in, you will notice that we've modified some of our trainings too to create bystander trainings as folks, decide to venture out and, monitor ICE agents, et cetera, and what to do should ICE be near you. And we've also created tailored trainings to, hospitals and other, and schools, et cetera, in order for them to have the best guidance possible. So we always have to shift with the times. I also apologize if you hear my dog bark. I live in a building, and sometimes folks run down the hallway and my dog will begin barking. So I apologize in advance if that does occur. We also have an immigration helpline, and this immigration helpline is not to give individuals legal advice or representation, but can share important information and resources. And what I mean by that is guidance on how to find information about one's immigration court case or pending immigration application. Some folks sometimes don't know where to go or where to start. So if you know someone that has no idea about their immigration court case, you're welcome to send them our way, and we can help identify that for them. We also provide general information about the different immigration pathways and processes that someone could apply for, and just general information about Know Your Rights and what to do after someone has been detained by immigration as well. Sometimes usually it'll be family members. So this is not an emergency helpline. If it is an emergency, I suggest to reach out to other places. And actually in the next slide, this could be a good opportunity to talk about the Macy hotline and the importance of the Macy hotline. And it's actually called the Massachusetts Access to Counsel Initiative. MIRA just launched this in November, and it's and I'll talk a little bit more about it, but many of you probably had advocated for money to create a statewide legal defense fund. And this is what came out of that, is this hotline to be able to connect individuals, with access to counsel. So we're talking about individuals who are facing deportation deportation proceedings or are currently in detention and they need a lawyer. It's always, in this slide here, you'll see who is eligible, how does it work, etc. We do provide interpretation. Our intake managers do speak Spanish, but we have other languages as well. And the eligibility, if someone doesn't know if they're eligible or not, it's always worth having them give a call to this hotline in order to have their case vetted and see if they're eligible. But the premise around this is for the person to be able to speak with someone and figure out whether they have an avenue of relief available for them, and someone will work with them through that. So the hotline, number is 508-505-4588, and happy to put a link later in the presentation for you folks to have access to this. So before I get started, I felt like it was very important to sort of level set and add some context to where we are as a country. The way I see it is that the narrative around immigration has greatly shifted. It really is no longer whether you are documented or undocumented. Simply being an immigrant makes one a target. And we have seen this play out in our communities, in our Commonwealth, and all over the country. I'm sure some concrete examples is we've seen, immigrants right before their naturalization oath taking it to be taken out of the line and told that they cannot naturalize today when they've met all the requirements because their country was on a travel ban list, right? So this is just one concrete example on how folks are being targeted. An individual who is here on a student visa voicing, their opinion on an op-ed, a Tufts University student, going through detention, et cetera, is just targeted ways that immigrants, are being targeted by this administration. So with that being said, this is an aggressive federal administration that seeks to deport 1 million people per year. And I just want you to stop and think about that for a second. That's almost 3,000 people per day. And we have to ask ourselves, how do they plan on accomplishing this goal? It's a big number, and we have to think about how they're going to accomplish it. And there are many ways, but I did want to share a few with you tonight. And I think the first one that really comes to mind is they're stripping the legal protections from immigrants who have followed every rule and everything that the federal government has asked of them. And I'm talking about folks with temporary protective status holders, also known as TPS. And I'm talking about folks from Haiti, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Honduras, and so many other countries. I'm also talking about people who came here on humanitarian parole. Think about the folks from Afghanistan whose families put everything on the line for our country to help out in this area. And I'm even talking about U.S. citizens through denaturalization. I'm also a naturalized citizen. I worry every single day of what could happen, whether it's for speaking out or doing this kind of work or being in this line of work, trying to improve the lives of immigrants. But these are all people who were told to do it the right way, quote unquote, do it the right way. And now they're being told that they must leave. If you'll allow me, I think it's important to tell you who these immigrants are. They're not just a statistic on a piece of paper or a number on an Excel sheet, like this administration likes to think of them as. These are caregivers in our nursing homes who look after our grandparents. They are nurses who look after the sick and injured, and they are service workers who cater to our every needs when each and one of us decide to participate in our local economy. So it's important to humanize these individuals and how and where they live in our communities and the different functions that they provide. The other way that they're thinking of reaching this goal is they're trying to turn our law enforcement agencies into extensions of ICE, including our police departments. Just last year in January, there were 135 contracts with law enforcement agencies across the country. And today, you won't believe this, there are well over 1,300 of these contracts and counting. They cannot meet their arrests, detention, and deportation goals without the cooperation of states and local municipalities. That is why they're also offering generous benefits to entice law enforcement to sign up for these contracts. Well, here's the deal. They have a $170 billion budget, the largest of any law enforcement agency in the country, and they plan to recruit 10,000 new agents with benefits such as a $50,000 sign-on bonus, and even offering bounty bonuses for the number of people that they arrest. So I just wanted to provide you with that overview as to where we are, and this will help us shape the conversation in this presentation momentarily. So with that being said, how have we responded? Well, Mira has responded by launching the Protecting Massachusetts Communities campaign, and this includes a steering committee founded by Mira, the Brazilian Workers Center, the SEIU unions, 509, 1199, 32BJ, and State Council. This also includes other unions like the Massachusetts Teachers Association, the ACLU, and Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action. And of course, that's just a steering committee. We have other coalition members, including the League, who is a part of this work as well. But we came around together around the premise of what we can control and what we cannot control. And I think this is very important to keep in mind, because we don't want to provide anyone a false sense of hope or a false sense of security in these situations, right? ICE is going to continue to do the work that ICE does, right? And we as a state can create hard boundaries and disentangle ourselves from, providing resources, from providing operational assistance. And I'll get a little bit more into that momentarily. But we came up with 3 priorities or actions that the legislature can take this session that can have an immediate effect on the lives of immigrants across the Commonwealth. And these 3 core, what we call priority protections is we want to ban any future 287G agreements. When I spoke earlier, I said contracts that had, expanded all across this country. That's what I was referring to. And in another slide, I will share a little bit more of what that is for those who may not know. But also prohibit informal partnerships is another core priority of this campaign. And, we're talking about database sharing, and I'll provide some concrete examples in the next slide as well. We're also talking about creating a fund for immigrant legal defense fund. And while that has been created, in a slide later in this presentation, I'll talk a little bit about more of the funds that we're seeking in order to grow this. And this is what helps our Macy hotline that I was speaking about earlier, because we want to create a statewide, program to help low-income immigrants be able to access counsel. Okay, so if I look like I'm looking away from the screen, it's because I have a couple of monitors here. But what does a 287G and informal collaboration mean? Well, 287G agreement is an arrangement that delegates immigration enforcement powers to state and local enforcement, including the power to perform civil immigration arrests on behalf of ICE. So what does this all mean? Well, it means that easily a law enforcement agency right here in Massachusetts can log on to ICE's website, and they can, within 5 minutes, fill out an application, say, I want to be part of this contract. So it would turn their, police departments into extensions of ICE, meaning they could, arrest people without criminal warrants, take and maintain custody of individuals on behalf of ICE. They can even initiate deportation proceedings and transfer individuals to ICE custody for deportation. So think about that. It's really, there's been a lot of studies done around this of what 287G contracts do. It's led to, back during the Obama years, it led to racial profiling in the states of Virginia and Arizona. If anything, I think one of the sheriffs that had a contract out in Arizona was prosecuted because of the rampant racial profiling that was occurring, with this particular contract. And not just that. Public safety officers were spending more time doing the job of the federal government than they were doing their own, jobs as police officers. And we want to make sure that this does not happen here. And, for the record, there are no 287G, contracts in Massachusetts right now, with the exception of the Department of Corrections in Massachusetts. So I want to share that, but there is no, law enforcement currently enrolled in that. And that's why it's very important that we be proactive and ensure that no new contracts get signed, which is one of our core priorities that I mentioned earlier. On the other side of this, we have informal collaboration. or you can call it operational assistance. I think a lot of us use different, language around this, but it's simply cooperation between state or local officials and federal immigration authorities that happens outside of these contracts, right? And I wanted to provide you folks with a few examples. This is not an exhaustive list. There are so many other, concrete examples that you can also find in the news. And I think WBUR recently, published an article that talked about the different municipalities and the ways police departments, share information. But an example here is a jail calls ICE before someone is released so federal agents can arrive and take custody. A police department shares a home address, a court appearance date, or a custody status update with ICE to help them locate or arrest someone. A jail keeps someone in custody past their release time based solely on an ICE detainer request, which, by the way, it is not allowed here in Massachusetts. There's a court case called the Lund decision, which prevents this from happening. At the moment, and I think in a bill that we'll talk a little bit about later kind of codifies that, because there is a lot of confusion around what this this court case decision is, and oftentimes people spend a lot of time trying to do their research on it. The other example here is that local officials tell ICE when someone will appear at court, so ICE can arrest them immediately afterwards. And I think it's important to know that, just because someone is going to court doesn't mean that they are, guilty or charged or anything like that, right? I think they're going to solve their issue at the court where they can make those decisions. And we want to make sure that our courts are healthy and functioning, and making sure that folks, are seeking justice for whatever, the situation may be. And I'm talking about, victims, witnesses, and the individual in question here. And the other one is officers may ask about immigration status during a routine stop, not for criminal investigations, but to alert ICE, right? So imagine me, I'm a Latino man who may, be driving around, and if I get pulled over and they ask me, for my status, my immigration status, that could, potentially send me on a panic. Why do you need that information? What does that matter for stopping me for a tailgate, right? And it's probably under the suspicions that I speak another language, that I have an accent, that I look different from individuals. So I wanted to provide those concrete examples that could be helpful conceptually for you folks as well. Okay, so let me move on to the next slide here. And I promise I'm almost done, and I'll open it up for questions. So what is the state of affairs here in Massachusetts? I think we are in a very different place than we were many months ago. I think if you had asked me a few months ago, are we going to be able to accomplish something? I'd say yes, but it's going to take a lot of pushing and a lot of more work to be able to get something done. And we weren't sure what we would get from that. I think fast forward now to where we are today, I think there's an increased anxiety and alarm in the state house that folks want to be able to do something that protects, immigrants. But I want to share with all of you that anything that gets done in this legislature isn't just about immigrants. This isn't an immigrant problem. This is an American problem. This is something that you and I and all of us in this phone call are a part of, right? And I say that because imagine, the child who is in a school, an American-born white child who's in a school who may have a peer or a friend of theirs in a classroom who may be an immigrant, and imagine having their parents being taken away. That's going to put his peer in a pressure and tell his parents, like, hey, Johnny's, parents were just deported and Johnny has nowhere to go, and I feel sorry for him, right? It goes to show the trauma that it inflicts in all of us. So I say this isn't just an immigrant problem. This is a problem that we all face together, and we have to stand united for it. So where we are is that the state legislature has filed many pro-immigrant bills this session. This year, Mira, as part of the PMC coalition, is advocating for the swift passage of legislation that limits formal and informal collaboration with ICE, as I mentioned in the second slide of what are core priorities. This coalition is agnostic in terms of the bill, in terms of the vehicle. We just want to see those three core priorities be reflected in there. And there's things that we can tweak and change, etc. But this legislation will likely be drawn from existing House and anticipated Senate late filed bills. For example, let me show what those look like. One bill, maybe you have heard of it, is the PROTECT Act. So, 5608. This is sponsored by the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus. And it does these four things. It prohibits police questioning about immigration status. I think that's very important because when folks get asked about their immigration status, they may not be willing to come forward, about a crime that they may have witnessed. It limits the formal and informal assistance to ICE by police and courts, just as I mentioned in the previous slide of what those look like. It protects the rights of federal ICE detainees housed in Massachusetts, and it prohibits immigration arrest at, around, or in transit to or from courthouses without a judicial warrant. And that last piece there is very important of why it needs to be arrest at, around, or in transit to a courthouse. And I think for those who have been paying attention to the news, a lot of people have been, really taken on the courthouse grounds or outside or on their way, to court, and sometimes inside the courthouse themselves. So this is a way to sort of, legally protect courthouses to make sure that folks are able to have their day in court. And I just want to put in a very quick plug here is that there will be a hybrid public forum on Wednesday, March 4th at 11 a.m. I think it's very important for people to show up, even if you're shy and you don't want to, say anything. I think sometimes even showing up as a person and being there really sends a powerful message to the immigrants who may be watching on, online to say, oh, wow, they really were able to pack the house. And there's that many people that actually and truly care about us in this environment. I think the registration will end on Monday by 5 o'clock. So if you would like to testify or submit oral, or written testimony, I would do so before then. But please, keep in mind Wednesday, March 4th at 11 a.m. There will be a forum on this, and you can count Mira to be there as well as some of the other coalition members. So let me quickly move on to the next bill. So the other bill that's out there is the governor's proposed supplemental budget bill, so 50-50. This is what a lot of us, advocates call the sensitive locations bill. So it's supposed to protect. So what's important to note here for you folks is this idea of sensitive locations was a Department of Homeland Security policy. It wasn't a law, it was a policy that was implemented during the Obama years to instruct ICE you cannot show up to, courthouses, schools, daycares, hospitals, right? Because we want to make sure that folks can trust their institutions and go about their daily lives. Because if you make these institutions unsafe and no one goes to them, then that really harms all of society from being able to partake in civilian life. So with this, bill that the governor put forward, it would prohibit warrantless arrests in courthouse interiors. So there's that language again, interiors. It's not mentioning anything about the exterior or going to the courthouse. So that's something to keep in mind and something we want to, work on. It would put schools, daycares, hospitals, and other medical facilities and houses of worship. I do want to put in a quick little plug here that this may not move as a supplemental budget, but in another format. And what I mean by that is, although it is in the supplemental budget, it is very much possible that it may appear, it could appear as an amendment in, another bill. The Senate has yet to come up with their own, version of the PROTECT Act, if you will. I'm not saying that that's what they're going to do, but I'm just saying whatever they come out with, it's expected in the next, few weeks to do so. Perhaps it could appear there as well, right? So there are many other avenues which this will happen. And the idea is to be able to, move this forward as quickly as possible because we don't want to keep our immigrant communities waiting. So that's what I have to say about this. A couple of other priorities that we'll be fighting for and advocating for at the legislature is so last year we asked the state, so thank all of you who advocated with us last year. I don't think that this was, the state kept sending messages out that it was a turbulent year given all the federal funding cuts, et cetera, but we were able to secure $5 million. For some, that could be a drop in the bucket, but I think it was a good start for us to initiate this, program that we call now, this all stemmed from the Immigrant Legal Defense Act, which is a standalone bill that was introduced last year for the first time. And then, this predates my time at Mira, but then it became a budget advocacy strategy as well. And so we were able to secure those $5 million. We started running the program in November, so it's only been around for just a few short months. And our hope is to whatever data we have to be able, to advocate to be able to secure more funding, right? As of right now, we've been able to provide 200 individuals with access to counsel. And I think something to take away from this is that in immigration court, you're not afforded a lawyer, right? If you can't afford one, then I'm sorry, then you don't have anyone to represent you. And sometimes you have to navigate that system by yourself. And this can happen to children too. I'm sure many of you have seen how this occurs at the border where kids have to represent themselves, which is absolutely ridiculous. But I think this gives people a fighting chance to fight their cases. And a statistic to take away is that immigrants who are in deportation proceedings are 5 times more likely to win relief from deportation if they have access to counsel. And immigrants who are in detention are 10 times more likely to get relief from detention if they have access to counsel. So I think this is the idea behind this program, is to give vulnerable individuals who cannot afford access to counsel. So this year, we're going to be asking for $15 million, which is a lot. But I think we have to continue to push this number up until we're able to reach a good number of individuals to assist. And I have to give it to our team and the many organizations that are participating in this program. We were able to hire 22 attorneys, or 24, don't quote me on it, very fast to be able to help with this and to be able to provide 200 individuals with access to counsel. Okay. So the other, program that we'll be advocating for at MIRA is $2 million for Citizenship for New American program. So this budget line item funds citizenship application services provided by community organizations across Massachusetts. And this is something that we do in coalition. So as MIRA, we sometimes also partake in other coalitions that we may not be the leaders in, but we allow other individuals to lead, and we're there to support them in any way that we can. But the point of this program is U.S. citizenship is the strongest, protection, and probably often, times against any deportation and family separation. In 2025, demand for citizenship services rose by 30%. And state funding for citizenship services has actually decreased from 2 million in fiscal year 22 to only 1.5 million in fiscal year 26. However, I think there's just a lot of fear right now in terms of applying for anything, just because folks have been picked up even in their own, immigration proceedings or, their naturalization, ceremonies, et cetera. So I think there's still a little bit fear, but that's no reason to continue to fight for a service that will be, utilized for a lot of individuals. Okay. So you've heard me speak a lot just now, but I think what's important is how do you folks get involved? What action can you take? And, you can scan this QR code with your phone and it'll take you to one of our pages. I think this one will prompt you to send an email to your legislators. I'm sure many of you on this phone call may have already emailed your legislators. For those who have not, an extra step, depending on how your conversations went, is to, schedule a meeting with your legislator as well. But what do you do if your legislator is already supportive? And I often find this in groups that I'm working with, right? Like the greater Boston area tends to have a lot of legislators that are supportive of what we're advocating for, and a lot of the aforementioned bills on here, and they just don't know what else to do. They feel helpless because they want to do more. Well, luckily for us, not only are we trying to build internal pressure within the State House, but we also want to create that external pressure too. A lot of us on the call today, this is probably a topic that matters to you personally. Maybe it matters to someone else, but you want to be a good ally. Or maybe, this is something that you want to see get done because of the fear, where the state of our country and where it's currently in. Well, there are a lot of people out there right now across the Commonwealth that are, life happens. They might not be paying attention to the news. They might be living their lives, and they need someone to give them a phone call and just say, hey, are you aware that this is happening here in Massachusetts? Do you mind taking 60 seconds of your time to call your legislators? And so that leads me to the third point here, which is phone banking. MIRA will be having phone banking opportunities. There will be one tomorrow. March 5th and March 12th from 6 to 8 p.m. Maybe some of you are skilled phone bankers. You may have done it before, so we would love to have you there. So feel free to sign up, and I can actually post a link into the chat for those who are interested in signing up and registering for this. And I'll put it in just a moment when I'm done sharing my slides. Right, I think phone banking is an important strategy here. There are many purple districts in Massachusetts, and I'm talking about the South Coast. I'm talking about, the outer parts of Worcester that are a little bit more purple. And, there are some legislators that just need an extra push from their constituents. So our jobs is to mobilize their constituents to give them a call. And every legislator has a different threshold, right? Some of them might have a low one where they say, if I get about 30 calls from my constituents, that's enough for me to act. And then some might have a higher threshold. So our job is to really mobilize those individuals. And don't be freaked out if they say, oh, if they don't seem non-committal. Sometimes there are purple legislators that will be very honest with their constituents and say, hey, I'm very supportive of this. I may not sign my name as a co-sponsor, but if it were to come down, to a vote, I'd be willing to support this. So try to read between the lines or just directly ask them. And if you're talking to an elected official that's already supportive, I think it's important to say, okay, what are you doing to convince your colleagues to move on this, right? I think there's many touch points that are very important here. So please join us for these phone banks. And then the last thing, my fourth point here on how to get involved is on March 18th at 9:30 a.m. We will come together at the Massachusetts State House, not only to be seen, but to also be heard. And I'm asking for all of you to bring your lived experiences, your policy expertise directly to these decision makers. I think this is the only way that we'll be able to shape policies that really truly reflect the needs and dignity and humanity of the immigrants in our Commonwealth. And we need Massachusetts legislators to continue to hear from their constituents on this issue. So we will be doing Immigrants Day at the State House. This will be my first year at MIRA in official capacity running it with my colleagues. I've been prior many times, and it's one of my favorite advocacy days at the State House. So I hope that you folks can join us then. And I will also drop a link for folks who want to RSVP or sign up to be there. And one last thing here before I close it up and open it up to questions is MIRA is also hosting Know Before You Go, virtual trainings and sessions for people who have general questions about Immigrants Day at the State House. And we're doing those every Friday from 11 a.m., starting at 11 a.m. And it's running from all of February through March 18th or prior to, Immigrants Day at the State House. So I did want to provide that with you if you had any questions regarding that. Okay, I feel like I've thrown a lot at you folks today. I hope it was informative. I hope it was helpful, and I'm happy to answer, any questions you may have.
Thanks so much, Gil. That was amazing. We're so grateful for all of your hard work. And just to recap for anyone who came in a little later, the good news is that an immigration bill will pass this session. We've been working on this for 10 years. We're ready. We're so ready. Immigration legislation will pass to protect immigrants' rights. Right now, the PROTECT Act has a hearing next week, March 4th at 11 a.m. I'm sorry, I have my camera off. At 11 a.m., League of Women Voters of Massachusetts supports that bill. Amy is working hard to write her written testimony on behalf of LWVMA. I will be there. I know so many folks are on this call were there for the Safe Communities Act hearing. I'm grateful for your work on that. And then we do expect a Senate bill in the next couple of weeks. We just, we haven't seen anything in draft form yet, but we do expect Senate action. So something is going to pass. It's just what's in it. And so we want to make sure that we have those priority protections in there outlined by Gil and the Protecting Massachusetts Communities Coalition. So thank you, Gil, for that awesome work. And we look forward to phone banking and to attending Immigrants Day at the State House. So turning it over, let's maybe go to the chat and see what questions we have in there. Colleen asked, should we meet with our local police department about public safety and ICE?
I think that's a good effort. I think it's important for, public safety officials to hear directly from their communities. I think, I used to live in East Boston for a very long time, a very heavy immigrant, neighborhood in Boston. And, we often touched base with, the police department there that would come to our neighborhood associations, or we would have them come in and talk to our neighborhood associations about the importance of keeping, everyone safe. So I think that's a good, you can set up forums in that way that, can produce discussions and be productive as well. So I do encourage it, and it's good to get a sense of, where your police departments are more generally. I wouldn't, push any specific legislation. I think you would have to walk in a little bit more prepared for those meetings, right? If it's more of a one-on-one, high level policy related thing, just to make sure that, we're saying the right things. So there is no confusion, right? Because that might cause a situation where they'll call their legislators and say, "Hey, I'm hearing, from folks on this issue that the legislature is going to, prevent us from doing X, Y, Z." So those have to be more carefully crafted meetings, so you folks can get in a group and talk about it and come up with important, talking points for that. Or you can do it in more of a public forum, like a neighborhood association, where the guards may be a little bit more down and hearing from other individuals. I hope that helps answer your question.
Thanks, Gil. Yes, so we have 44 local leagues throughout the Commonwealth, and we really enjoy meeting with our local officials and partnering with them. I know in Needham, we worked with the Needham Police on many issues, including firearm safety. So all leagues are amazing at having positive relationships with their local officials. So that's awesome. Any other questions for Gil? Let's see if there's
I did want to raise one thing for
Sure.
all of you on the call today. I know, the league and Jen and many of you have been with us since the days of the Safe Communities Act. And I just want to let you know that in one of the slides for the Protect Act that I was talking about, that includes a lot, if at all the elements of the Safe Communities Act in it, with a few minor tweaks to it. So I did want to point that out for individuals who are probably wondering, "Hey, Mira has been fighting for the Safe Communities Act for almost a decade. What happened to it?" Right? I think with how quickly the landscape is shifting around us, it's not that we've abandoned it, is that now we see these new elements being presented in a different vehicle, and we are supportive of that too.
Excellent point. Tracy?
Hi, thank you so much. Hi, good to see you. I thank you so much for your presentation. I'm curious about the informal sort of arrangements, relationships that police has, and sort of what you're seeing about that, how rampant that is. How can we be intuitive to that?
That's an excellent question, and a hard one to answer, in the sense that the only way you can catch these situations from happening is submitting a public notice request, right? It is something you would have to be very specific in your request of what you're looking for each of this. And, they keep logs of their conversations, text messages, emails, etc. So that is a way that the ACLU and many other organizations have been submitting these in order to see if informal collaboration is truly happening. Because it's not very clear to the naked eye, right? We're not in the police officer's car trying to watch over, his text messages or, what they're communicating about. So that it's hard to catch them. But I would say that is one way that has been effective. And actually, the WBUR article that I was referencing did just that. They were able to pull these public notice requests. I feel like I'm not saying the right name of the request, but it's something along those lines. So I apologize.
The FOIAs, Freedom of Information Act, the FOIA requests.
Yeah,
Is that what
FOIA's for
ACLU
the
is?
federal government, but I know that
Okay.
the
Yeah.
state has a different name for it. Yeah, but it's
Okay.
a public request in any way, similar to a FOIA.
Right. And I'm happy to share that WBUR article because it does outline the specific police departments. When we met with LWB, Wellesley was kind enough to meet with me and leader Alice Paish of Wellesley. She was not attuned to all these examples. So we do try to drive as much data as we can to the chairs of public safety to say, look, this is, documented data reported by a news outlet, and we have the information. So we do. That's an excellent question, Tracy. We do try to drive that data because it was very nebulous even during the hearing, the public safety hearing. We followed up with as much data as we could. So that's an excellent question. And other questions for Gil?
I have a question.
Sure. Hi, Julie.
Hi. I know that the strategy that those who oppose immigration use is to delay things in court, to sort of sin first, and then it takes a long time for things to be resolved. Have you thought about that and what, if anything, can be done around that?
Do you mind repeating the question? I'm sorry, I don't think I understood.
I'm talking about the fact that sometimes ICE and others act before they disregard the law and they commit the sin and then drag it out so that it makes it more complicated and difficult and challenging to resolve. So I wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
That's an excellent question and something that I think about often, right? I think that there's a room for all of us to play in all of this, right? I think the lawyers will always tell you, well, we need to set up the legal, guardrails that will help ensure this, even if they violate, the law and then things take a while, right? The damage is done, but it's still very important to still want to pursue that avenue because then it creates precedent for case law for how to be able to interact this, and states and are also learning from each other and how they handle these types of court cases or whatever the law that was violated, how different attorney generals handle this, and they're all in communications with each other. I don't think that I will be able to give you the answer that you're looking for because that is something that we're unable to avoid. I think some of us are witnessing exactly how they are breaking, the law in multiple ways, and for those things to take time. I think the other portion of it is while we continue to pursue those legal avenues, I think it's still very important for all of us to play our part, whether it's pushing for the legislature, whether it's pushing our municipalities on whatever those things may be. I think they're going to do what they're going to do. And we just need to be attuned to it and recording it and documenting it as well. I don't think I have the best answer for you because I don't think that there's ever been any way around that of how to truly stop them in that sense. I think that would be a conversation for our members of Congress to help us out with. That's for sure, to be able to rein them in.
Thank you. Thank you. I had one more question if it's possible, but if nobody else does.
Oh, sure. We just have one in the chat and then we'll come back to you if that's okay. How safe are foreign-born children adopted as babies by U.S. citizens?
That's a very good question. I have not thought about that. I haven't seen anything come up lately, around it. So I'm sorry. I wish I was able to provide you. It's something I can look into, but it's not something that has truly come up with. I know adoptions do happen, internationally. I think a lot of it is probably going to be the procedural hurdles that goes on with international adoptions and whether they're still happening, et cetera. That's just not an area that I'm attuned to, so I apologize. But it's a very good one. I mean, I think we're all witnessing our immigration system, reforming, not in a positive way, but I think it's creating different barriers, right? For example, you may have heard the news that now they want to arrest and detain refugees who don't have a green card, right? And these are individuals who have been fully vetted by the U.S. government before coming to the United States. And if you follow how long, it takes a refugee to be able to get their green card, it's not right when they arrive. They have to wait about a year, apply for it, and because the U.S. citizenship and immigration services is so backlogged and bureaucratic. It can take years before they get their green card, right? So that's an injustice in of itself. I know that's beyond the scope of this, conversation and presentation, but I want to sort of give you another example of sort of the different barriers that different groups are going through. So if it's happening to them, I'm sure that there's changes happening to foreign children that are adopted by U.S. citizens.
Eileen asks, how is Mira working with DCF regarding children of immigrant parents who are at risk of deportation?
I think that's a good question as well. I don't think Mira is directly involved with DCF. I know that there are other groups out there that have, been more focused on this, topic. And I'm sure you've seen sort of how the governor has come out with guidance in her executive. I can't remember if it was in the executive order, if it was in the supplemental budget bill, but to provide guidance for families to come up with plans should the families, be separated. And I think that's ongoing right now. But I can't say that we're directly involved in that.
I know La Collaborativa with Gladys, they do a lot of that family planning as well. Julie, you had another question?
It's really related to the question that just came up. It's about
Okay.
Providing for those when somebody in a family is taken, that those family members have the resources to know what to do about that, and also know everything they need to know to keep on going while this is going on with their parent or whoever it is. I know some churches are getting involved in trying to sit with people and help prepare documents and answers to questions so that they'll be as prepared as possible. That seems outside maybe of this group, but it does exist, right?
The family planning. Oh, yes, absolutely. There's many guides. I believe on our own website, we also offer some guides of what families can do. Look, I'll be honest with you. When I worked for U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren, I met with many families who came to us that were facing deportation. My role in that was to assist them and seeing what avenues of relief were available to them, whether it was connecting them with an attorney or directly communicating, with ICE. That is a basic function of members of Congress. And, sometimes when we had these conversations with some family members, it was uncomfortable for me to tell them, hey, look, I don't know if this is going to work out with you based on the legal assessment that's been provided, but I think it's very important for you to sit down with your family and come up with a plan, right? If you have assets, whose name is going to be on that asset, right? Because it's so much more difficult to deal with all these things when you have been deported and are living in another country, right? So it's very important that families have those tough and difficult but necessary conversations should that day come. And many family members would always tell me, I know this day is going to happen, but I want to thank you for listening and hearing me out and providing any guidance, right? I think that sometimes is tough to do. But for some folks, it's like, what's the point? Well, it's good to have your house in order before anything happens.
Thank you.
Well, Gil, it's 7:57. We want to thank you for your time. If we didn't answer any questions, I'll do my best to answer any questions left in the chat. I can follow up with you tomorrow. But we do want to say thank you, Gil. We applaud you. We are with you. We are with you next week at the hearing, and we are doing our best to protect immigrants in the Commonwealth. So thank you very much for all that you do. And take care, everyone. Good night.
Yeah,
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. Good night.